In Generation 5, the Fighting type was one of the best types in competitive Monotype Pokemon, a format where you can only use one type. For example, if you choose to use a Water type, you can use Pokemon like Gyarados or Swampert. But fast forward to Generation 8, and Fighting is one of the worst types you can pick. You might think that it's only because of the Fairy type, and while that's certainly a factor, Fighting was still a good type in Generation 6 when Fairy was introduced. So what exactly happened between Gen 5 and Gen 8? Let's find out. Also make sure to subscribe. A lot of you are not subscribed and it's free and helps out the channel a lot. We're on the road to 100k subscribers and we're almost there. Let's start from the beginning with Generation 5. The Monotype format itself wasn't created before that, so Gen 5 is effectively the beginning. Fighting and Psychic are two of the best types in Gen 5, but we'll touch on Psychic a little bit later. As a type itself, Fighting is definitely one of the upper tier types. Offensively, it's super effective against 5 types including the Steel type, which is well known for being one of the best types in the game. Furthermore, only Ghost is immune to Fighting. Fighting has plenty of strong attackers with close combat, and stab-boosted close combats coming off powerful attackers are very deadly against teams who have a neutral type matchup. Defensively, Fighting can hold its own because it's only weak to 2 types, Psychic and Flying. But what makes Fighting truly stand out are the Pokemon available. Simply put, there are a lot of really good Fighting type Pokemon, and by using dual types, Fighting type Pokemon can cover a lot of weaknesses. For example, Scrafty's Dark typing and high special defense let it take on a lot of Psychic type Pokemon. It also gives Fighting a playable matchup versus Ghost, who would ordinarily be tough because of the immunity to Fighting. Scrafty's Dark type is obviously helpful, but Shed Skin means it's not afraid of Will-O-Wisp and can either become a devastating Bulk Up or Dragon Dance match winner. Choice Scarf Mega Horn Heracross can outspeed a lot of Psychic type Pokemon, and Terrakion with its high speed, high power, and Stone Edge can beat a lot of Flying type Pokemon. There are plenty of powerful Pokemon that help versus the neutral matchups too. Keldeo can dominate a Ground type matchup and Breloom can take care of Water. The Heracross I mentioned earlier can use Pursuit to trap Latios on Dragon type teams. Fighting also has one of the best offensive Stealth Rock users in Infernape. Infernape's high speed and access to Taunt means it can reliably get hazards up and keep hazards off. Aside from Stealth Rock being one of the best moves overall, it's huge for the Flying and Dragon type matchups because Defog does not exist yet. Essentially, Fighting type teams have the tool to play against any type. Not only do they have their own powerful top threats like Keldeo and Terrakion, they have answers to other types' top threats with Pokemon like Scrafty. That is the story of Gen 5, where Fighting was one of the best types along with Psychic. It's worth noting that as of making this video, Latios was very recently banned in Gen 5 for being overpowered. There is a less powerful replacement in Latias, and while there hasn't been a major tournament since the Latios ban, it's reasonable to assume that the Latios ban would help Fighting even more. But entering the next generation, there were some major changes like the Fairy type, but it wasn't game-breaking. In Gen 6, even though the type was introduced, there weren't a lot of good Fairy type Pokemon. Mono Fairy was not good. There were too few options and they didn't synergize well with each other. For example, Klefki could reflect and light screen, but only Belly-Drum Azumarill was a huge beneficiary. There's not a lot of Fairy type diversity either, which is important when building a Monotype team. In fact, Mono Fairy literally saw 0 usage in this year's Monotype Premier League for Gen 6. What Fairy did do though was it added a Fairy type option for other types. For example, Water could now use Azumarill, Flying could now use Togekiss, and Psychic could now use Mega Gardevoir. That's what Fighting had to adapt to, not Mono Fairy itself. Pokemon like Scrafty, for example, fell in usage because it would get completely shut down by any Fairy type Pokemon. On the other hand, other Fighting types got better. Cobalion became more common on Fighting with its Stab Iron Head to hit Pokemon like Mega Gardevoir. Fighting also got a lot of new Pokemon in Gen 6. It got Hawlucha, which is a devastating unburdened sweeper, and it got Mega Gallade and Mega Medicham. Although Mega Medicham would end up getting banned, Mega Gallade gave Fighting yet another powerful attacker, this time a Pokemon that could beat the Poison type. There were also secondary effects too. For example, because Scrafty wasn't good anymore, Psychic had a better matchup overall because now it only had to find ways to beat Scarf Heracross, not Scarf Heracross and Scrafty. On the flip side, Mega Sableye ended up getting banned in Gen 6, which would have been problematic for fighting. Mega Altaria was also banned too. Overall, fighting types definitely got worse in Generation 6. Still though, it was decent overall, it just wasn't elite like in Generation 5. But Gen 7 is where the fighting type descended into complete unviability. Gen 7 added Como and Buzzwole, which is nice, but it also added a lot more to other types. It was an avalanche of many different things. Most notably, Generation 7 introduced the Tapu forms. First of all, the Tapu form single-handedly made Fairy a good type. Tapu Lele would get banned, but the Tapu forms are versatile, have good stats, good type diversity, and can do almost anything. Unlike Gen 6, Mono Fairy was not just usable, it was top tier even without Tapu Lele. On top of that, it meant that other types got access to an amazing Fairy type Pokemon too. For example, Electric now got Tapu Koko. There were other good Fairy types added in Gen 7 too, like Mimikyu and Sticky Web Ribombee. Besides Pokemon, it was the moves themselves too. Moonblast and even Dazzling Gleam are strong moves that are literally impossible to resist as a fighting type Pokemon. The moves can invalidate any defensive backbone fighting types try to have, and it means that fairies are good offensively and defensively versus fighting. Also, Toxapex was introduced, which gave water and poison a really good fighting type matchup. The only fighting type that had a dominant matchup versus Toxapex was Mega Gallade. Mantine got the move Roost in Gen 7, and Alolan Raichu was introduced, giving Electric a powerful Psychic-type Pokemon. On top of all of that, the power creep of Gen 7 meant that Sableye was no longer overpowered and was unbanned. That created another Pokemon tough for the fighting type. Also, Mega Altaria got unbanned too, giving Dragon a Fairy-type Pokemon. All these different things combined to send fighting into a downward spiral, and with so many things it needed to figure out how to beat, it wasn't worth using overall. The old dominating fighting cores of generations past were simply invalidated by new additions, and fighting did not receive enough of a benefit to keep up. Generation 7 is where fighting became an unviable type. Gen 8 is Gen 7 but worse for fighting types. Fighting lost Mega Gallade, Breloom, and Z moves. At least in Gen 7, offensive teams could try and outplay and use a Z move at the right time to break through tough matchups. Not anymore. Also, Tapu Lele was unbanned from Monotype in Gen 8 because the terrains got nerfed. Unfortunately, Urshifu Dark would get banned from Monotype, and there was really nothing new that could save the fighting type. Zapdos Galar is fine, but doesn't do much to move the needle. While it's true that Mega Altaria and Mega Sableye don't exist in Gen 8, it didn't change the fundamental issue of so many good Fairy-type Pokemon and the fundamental issue of Toxapex. Many of the reasons fighting is bad in Gen 7 still apply in Gen 8. Other types got better and fighting types lost the arms race. At the end of the day, fighting started off as an elite type in Gen 5, dropped to an okay to good type in Gen 6, before finally descending into a terrible type in Gen 7 and in Gen 8. Thanks for watching, and if you want more Monotype content, check out my video about the top 5 types in competitive Monotype Pokemon.